Hey, everybody. Happy Wine Wednesday. I am sipping on I don't know if you can see it, but my Seahorse Whisperer mug with coffee counts for those coffee drinkers out there. I know we have a few. Some of these cool products are available on the website already, even though the site is not done with the articles. You can always get the cool gear. So I'm sipping on some Pinot Noir, and I'd love to know what you guys are sipping on in the comment section. I'm likely glitching, so I probably look like a robot. I'm like doing the freeze pose probably. It's because the reason we're late is because I was trying to update my computer last week. I apologize that we did not go live. I tried to turn on my computer and nothing. My significant other figured out that it was the cord, so the computer wasn't charging. It's not a computer, it's a laptop. It's a MacBook that I spent a lot of money on. It has a lot of RAM, a lot of space, and yet it wouldn't come on. So he figured it out, but we didn't know until I turned, because I only use it for streaming. So when I turned it on tonight, there was an update, but it said like 25 more minutes. So just explaining to you guys why I might be glitching. If I am, hopefully you can still hear me. And if I look funny, well, I am funny. So, go figure. With that being said, I've got Holly and Cheryl with me. We were talking beforehand. I know you guys were talking about a lot of stuff while I was trying to put together the computer. But what's the latest? What was your first question, Holly, that you were talking about?
Oh, I was just asking about Diamox. How long can you use it after the expiration date?
Okay, and what did Ray say? Because Ray is actually watching a hockey game. He couldn't join us tonight, but he's with us in spirit and probably in the comments. And either way, he answered in the group. Go
so
ahead.
so he messaged me back. He said it should be good for at least another year.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, because it's a confusing thing because my significant other tells me all the time the expiration date is like the best date. It doesn't mean it's really not good,
Yeah.
but it always worries me, right? Like if the company says it
Yeah.
expires.
Yeah, the thing is
Well, it says
most of this stuff, what happens is after a certain date, it slowly deteriorates. It doesn't just all of a sudden say, okay, today's the 20th. I don't work at all anymore to that from this point.
Right.
And I've seen it. I've seen people that mountain climbers that are climbing in the Himalayas or Himalayans, if you prefer, and they are taking Diamox. They have to have it to get up there. And even when it's expired, they have to take a little more to get the same efficacy from it, but it still works.
Gotcha. So Holly, you're going to keep it?
yeah, but I mean, how would you know? Like I have some right now that's 2 months past. So is it probably just as effective as it
It's
was
probably
two or
about
three
99.
months ago?
It's probably about 99.9% is effective. That's not
So
much.
the dose would
The
be the
thing
same
is,
for
when they label this stuff as not functioning past a certain date, that is somebody managed to get some of it to deteriorate at that age, and
Mm-hmm.
rather than get into a lawsuit for failure to perform, they just say, okay, it's dead. This stuff is no good past this date, and it's more of a cover to protect the drug companies from selling this stuff and getting into legal issues.
Which I get. And hey, Fish Fam Link, don't forget to check out all the Fish Fam links. It's not just this channel, it's multiple channels within the family of all our fishy friends. So check them out. And hey, Cora Works, I see you too. But yeah, and I get what you're saying, Cheryl. But the thing is, and I do the same. Like if milk is one day expired, I'm gonna smell it. I'm gonna, look, is there any
yeah.
curdling or anything? And then, if I'm baking with it, I kind of, in my head, I think, well, it's going to be heated. So likely it's okay, right? But as Holly was saying, how long past the expiration date can you go? Like if you're 6
Like,
months
how would
past
you
the
know
expiration
how
date,
much to use?
does that mean it's 50% effective? So you should double the dose, or then are you risking, overdosing the tank or the system? I guess there really is
Yeah,
no
I would
answer for that,
wonder,
right? But
like, how much to use. Like, how do you know then how much to use of it?
I mean, I guess the best answer is get more. I mean, that is the best
And I
answer.
have
Yeah.
I have more, I have
Right.
more of it that expires later on, but I have someone that needs to use it now. So I'm thinking if I send her that, will that be good enough to work right now? Or should I send her the stuff that expires farther out? Because I'd like to use this if it's still good.
Needed.
She may
Like
have
2 months is not long.
yeah, she may have to add a slight more to the med to the tank to get the desired results because it may have deteriorated, but it's going to be very minimal at this point.
Well, and Cheryl, with Diamox, we're talking about. I'm guessing it's being
They're
used for
pills.
some sort of. But I'm guessing,
No,
Holly, this is a situation where the seahorse is floating or something.
It's gas bubble disease.
And is the seahorse floating? Is that why she's using it
Oh,
or wants to
I
use it?
don't know. Yeah, I don't
Okay,
know.
so it's to alleviate the internal stuff. The
like,
well,
Or
because usually,
external. My guess is it's probably external from the sound of it.
okay. Well, why don't we jump into that actually before we go deeper into this? You said you had someone that was going to join us tonight.
Maybe. I asked her. This was just before we started, so I don't know if she's able to or not.
Okay. Well, are you allowed to tell the story? What's going on?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just asking about the
Oh,
Diamox so I know what to send her. That's
okay.
the
All right.
only
Well,
real concern at the moment.
let's
Because
do
she's
it.
already researched. She knows she needs it. She put up
Okay.
a post on our group, that she was having trouble getting it.
And
yeah.
I've been through that. I've been through that. If you do watch this later or now, I'm telling you, I've been through trying to get a hold of Diamox. I don't have any exotic vets in my area, and I didn't really feel comfortable going to my doctor and telling them I needed it for whatever, right? So I have had the same experience where it's really difficult to get a hold of Diamox. Um, and again, I think we should probably talk a little bit about why we use Diamox. Obviously, the person you're speaking with, Holly, has researched and knows she needs it. But I do want to kind of make sure everyone understands Diamox isn't a cure. It doesn't fix anything. It alleviates symptoms, right? So, Cheryl, how does Diamox work when you're dealing with gas bubble disease?
I would start. Uh, I would have to pull it back up and use the dosage that we have there on seahorse.org. And
No,
that
no,
was
no, 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 no. I know, but I'm just saying overall, why is Diamox used for gas bubble disease?
it's specifically designed as a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, which means basically it stops gases from certain specific gases from being developed and maintained within a body, a living, breathing body. And for
Absolutely.
seahorses, for humans, uh,
Because
the
you mentioned that people use it. People use it too, right? For what?
repeat it.
I said people use it also.
Oh
What?
yeah,
When do people use it?
people use it when they're climbing very, very high mountain peaks where the oxygen is very, very minimal. And basically, they can't breathe without it because, and the only people that don't tend to have to use the Diamox for that are the Sherpas who make their living climbing these peaks and grew up with them and have
So it's all
adapted.
about,
Basically, it's for altitude sickness.
yes,
Yeah,
right. I was going to say it's used for people use it for airplane flights and stuff, right? And Holly, what do
And
you mean by that?
glaucoma. It's also for glaucoma, where people have pressure in their eyes.
Gotcha.
It decreases the pressure.
So it's all
yeah.
about just relieving the gas pressure is the
They
bottom
use it
line.
in racehorses too, thoroughbred racehorses.
Mm,
However, you're not going to get any from a vet. I guarantee you that if you tried to get some off of a horse track, you wouldn't get anything. But
right.
that's another area that they use it in. They're trying to improve the overall respiratory rate of the horse so that they can run longer and faster.
Sure. And Holly, with seahorses, when we have a seahorse that has internal, external, any of those bubble diseases, we use Diamox in the sense that what? What does it do?
Well, it decreases, like we were talking about for glaucoma. It decreases the pressure, so it basically deflates them.
Yes. So if they're floating, we put them in Diamox, they stop floating. So it doesn't actually fix whatever the problem is, but it alleviates the pressure.
No, it's like taking aspirin or ibuprofen for a headache.
Right. Good.
Yeah,
Good.
You're killing the pain, but you're not eliminating the cause of the headache.
Right.
So, like for seahorses, like I mentioned to her, and she probably knows already because I don't know the whole situation, but I said, be sure to use antibiotics also because it's likely caused by a bacterial infection. So you want to treat the infection, not just the symptoms of it, is my take on it.
Totally agree. And even in cases where I dealt with a male that had pouch emphysema, but I knew because I actually was present when the male seahorse scraped his pouch on rock and he had a big white, like scar looking thing down his pouch. And then all of a sudden he had pouch emphysema. So, whether it's an injury or bacterial or whatever it is, there's an underlying problem. I'm just trying to make that point. Make sure you don't think, oh gosh, I got the seahorse to stop floating, or the seahorse has, stopped ballooning, or whatever, or the bubbles on the tail are gone. Don't think that that solved the problem. You need more than Diamox. You have to actually treat the seahorse, is all I was trying to say. But is there anything else that she had questions about? She's just trying to locate it, or?
Yeah, she posted on our group. Let me see.
Okay.
What it said. Started, so.
Wonderful. That's how it always goes. And while she's looking, I will tell you guys
go ahead.
Gas
bubble. I have looked online, says she needs Diamox. I've talked to 2 exotic vets in my area, and they were both about an hour away. Both of them says she needs to come in for an exam. And I can't imagine how stressful a 2-hour car ride would be when you're already stressed. Does anybody have any ideas? And that's typical. Vets, they want to see the patient. And when the patient is a fish, that makes it really difficult.
Oh, let me tell you, if you guys haven't been with the channel long, back when I first started years and years ago, I had a seahorse that had bubbles on its tail. It was a male, but he had bubbles on its tail. I was trying to get Diamox. I located finally an exotic vet that would actually, work with me in any way, shape, or form, about an hour away. And I contacted them and I said, listen, I've done the research. I've got literally scientific people with degrees that will tell you what they need. I know you're the vet, but I'm telling you, this is what my seahorse needs. Can you just prescribe me Diamox? And of course it was no, we have to see the patient. And they said, okay, so you'll need to bring the seahorse and leave it overnight. And I said, so do you have tanks set up? Because there's this whole filtration and schematic thing that really matters when it comes to seahorses. this seahorse is sick. It definitely doesn't need more stress under really bad conditions. And they were like, oh, well, yeah, you'll need to bring the tank. What? I mean, like, I'm gonna bring a tank and a skimmer and everything to set up in your office for
Right.
overnight. It just doesn't make sense. They're thinking like it's a goldfish.
No.
They're thinking like it can just sit in a glass of water and they can look at it and whatever, figure something out. And they don't know. And I mean, I'm not trying to say anything about vets. Vets are wonderful. But when it comes to seahorses, we don't have a seahorse vet, So it's really hard.
Yeah.
And I had the same struggle getting Dialogues. I don't have any answers.
Honestly, I got lucky. I had a conversation with my primary care.
Yeah.
And I brought her pictures of my seahorses. I brought her information from online about how to treat the disease. And she was really interested to hear about the
Oh, that's
seahorses.
awesome.
And I said, I know this is a long shot, but is there any way you could write me prescription for this, not for me, for my seahorses? And she got on her computer and research, and she says, well, it's not a controlled
Right.
substance. She says, so I don't think it's really a problem. It's not like an opioid or
Right.
something that people
Right.
are out trying to get. So she went ahead and wrote me a prescription for the Diabox. And when I need it, I just ask the doctor and say, oh, I need some more of the Diabox.
Well, that's amazing. And I definitely would say anyone out there that is in need for their seahorse, definitely talk to your primary care physician.
It's worth a try. I mean, they probably won't. I would imagine most will say no, but if you go about it the right way and they're reasonable, they just might help you out with that.
Well, and in my,
because I had even talked to my vet about it, and my vet said, we can't because we don't treat fish.
Right.
At all.
Right.
So.
And there's legal ramifications.
Maybe.
Well, and there's legal ramifications, like you said. Like if you, I mean, I don't even know, but people are crazy. Some people, and if somebody came back and said that this doctor wrote me a prescription that they knew was for my fish, it's just a whole thing, So I get why doctors can't and some won't. But if you have an amazing doctor that you have a trust relationship with, I mean, definitely try. There's nothing wrong with trying, because it is difficult to get, and it does work for alleviating the symptoms, right? And that's really important if your seahorse is floating or whatnot. And I don't know the actual case we're talking about. I didn't see the post before we went live, but if you are watching, we're here. Ask any questions. Fill us in on what's going on, and we'd be happy to help for sure. So on the side, is anything else going on with you, Holly, with your seahorses? Anything new? Anything cool?
No, they're not getting all the attention they want, but they're hanging in, and they're doing well. I'm gone most of the time, but they've learned that most days they have 2 meals a day now, like in the morning and then whenever I come home. And they're getting used to that. Whenever I come home, they watch for me, and they'll look and see me in the room, and then they go to their dishes and get ready because they know dinner's going to be coming. So they're cooperating, but it's my busy season right now. I'm in the insurance business. It's open enrollment, and I'm going nuts. And the seahorses are used to seeing me around and having 3 meals a day. And right now they're not getting all that attention, but they kind of know. I've had them a few years now, so this has happened before. So
do they get sulky though? Do they get kind of?
They do, yeah. Like there'll be like turning,
Yep.
and yeah, like Sadie especially, like sometimes she'll like wait to eat, like she's like acting like she's not going to
Right.
eat. And then when I leave the room, then she goes and chows down.
Yep.
Like she's holding a grudge against
I've
me.
literally okay, so I've literally when time changes, my schedule changes, all of a sudden you're not there all the time, like Holly's talking about, because I baby my seahorses so much and I spend so much time
Yeah.
with them and I'm a mama to them. I've literally watched, actually it was my girl from Vincent. I literally, when I went on
Mhm.
vacation, I had someone come feed them. We've talked about that in previous episodes. But when I came home, they all rushed. And of course, it's just food. They don't give a shit about me. But to me, it was like, oh, they're happy I'm
Yeah.
home. And the girl from Vincent, she swam up like a torpedo and acted like she was so happy. And then she saw who it was and saw it was me. And I swear to you guys, she was like, hmm, and turned around and was like, you left us. I'm telling you. So if you don't want these kind of, ridiculous problems with seahorses, don't baby your seahorses. Because Ray, if he was here, would say we are ridiculous. And he would never
Let
notice
me
that.
You
give you
know
an
what?
example.
Sadie reacted when I dyed my hair. When I dyed my hair at first, she was checking me
Yep.
out to make sure I was the same
Yep.
lady. And now she realizes, but it took her a minute. She was like kind of shy at first looking at me. And then she's like, okay, it's
They're not
you. But
stupid. Yeah.
her eyes still would be like,
Mm,
for a couple weeks just checking me out. Like, I don't know if she was like, I know something's different about you, but I can't figure out
yep.
what, or is that really you? I don't know what's going through her
The-
brain, but you could tell she was thinking because her eyes were just going,
And
looking at me.
anybody
They have
watching that is
strong
like, oh, wait,
visual.
hey, I'm gonna let you talk, Cheryl. But anybody watching that is like, these ladies are nutcases. We're really not. Keep seahorses, and then you'll get it. All right, what were you saying, Cheryl?
I was going to say there's nothing. Seahorses have actually remarkably good visual acuity, and they
Mhm.
can spot you and recognize you at quite a distance.
Oh,
And
sure.
I had one little female that I got with a group when I was first starting out. She wouldn't eat because she was much smaller than everybody else, and she was afraid to come down and eat.
Mm-hmm.
So I started feeding her a little bamboo skewer like they used to make shish kebab. And I
Yep.
was putting the frozen on the skewer and waving it in front of her in the back corner.
Yep.
It didn't take her long to figure out that the back corner was a great place to eat. Oh,
Right.
but it gets better. So one day I'm walking up, I'm feeding everybody. She's in the right front corner of the tank. She sees me walking toward the tank and she takes off as fast as she can swim. She swims over the top of all the other seahorses to the back left corner to get fed.
Of
Because
course.
that's where she
Who,
eats. That's
Yep.
yeah,
kind of the way it
who
works
had
with my
who had
seahorse
who trained
dishes.
on
They
that?
go to the area where they know I feed
Yep.
them.
And
Yeah,
again, if
I
Ray
think
was here,
Holly
he would
is
say that.
here.
Sorry, go ahead, Holly.
I think the
they're
person with
funny.
the 6 seahorse is here. I think she might
Yes.
be on here as Facebook user.
Yep. I'm gonna show the comments now. Andrea said, "Good evening, ladies." Hi, Andrea. So you have a vet to check out, and he does virtual visits, and I'm guessing that he's amazing and understands that seahorse keepers need a vet. So please provide me a link, put it in the comments, whatever, so that I can share it because that we need it. I saw that you are here. So if you're willing, if you don't want to share, that's totally fine. But I will say again, no judgment here. I've had multiple seahorses that either had internal, external. I've dealt with
Mhm.
gas bubble disease all throughout. And I know that online, people like Cheryl and Ray will say, oh, you should never see gas bubble disease anymore. We figured it out. Keep your tank clean. But that's
It's
not so
hard.
easy for the
Mhm.
average hobbyist. I mean, they're not wrong, but they've had 25 million years experience and they figured it out, right? And we're just starting, or well, I'm not, but you're just
Well,
starting.
and we're
Maybe you're
not
not just starting.
perfect.
We're not perfect, right? Thank you, Holly. Right. So
I
there's no
still learn
judgment
things
here.
from them. I
Huh?
still learn things all the time.
Right. I wasn't criticizing you at
Yeah.
all, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I was
It
saying,
just
like with Dan a lot. Dan
that,
would
that
say there
yeah.
should not be gas bubble disease anymore because we figured out it's just keep your tank clean. But that's a
But
really relative
doing that is
term.
hard
Yeah,
also.
yeah, yeah.
It,
And that makes
it's a gradual process, and
yes,
sometimes you stand there scratching your head trying to figure out what you did right when you're sitting there going, "That worked really well. What did I do?"
right.
Or you sit there going, "Oh, that doesn't look good." And
Or
it's
what's
a
wrong?
learning experience for you when you're taking care of seahorses, because
Yep,
there's really no right or wrong. And I can tell you people, there's people that have been at this as long as I have or longer that do things a little different than I do. It's a
yep.
matter of honing your own skills and becoming used to it and having the confidence in what's going on to say, okay, I need to do this now, or I don't need to do anything now.
But if you're not in that position yet, because you did ask the question in the group, we're here to answer any questions you might have and try
Yeah.
to help you. And there's no judgment, is what I was saying. And I'll tell you, I've had so many different experiences where, say, I figured out I had a female seahorse that just all of a sudden stopped eating. And of course, I instantly freaked out because I'm a mama to my seahorses. I instantly noticed, right? Because I'm observant of them. And I was like, what is wrong with this seahorse? She started getting darker. And I was like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. It's bacterial, freaking out. Within like maybe 5 days, she was doing an egg exchange. It was her
Mhm.
first one. She was like on her period or something, like moody about it. Not on her period, that doesn't make sense. But you know what I mean? Like she didn't know what was going on with herself. So she was not happy and she was moping. And then within 5 days, she did an egg exchange. Everything was great. Everything was fine. But I freaked out and thought that something was wrong and jumped to conclusions and tried to whatever. And so like Cheryl said, it's about observing your seahorses, getting to know their behaviors, and you know,
Yeah.
not reacting instantly. But in your case, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. In
Well,
your
it's
case,
just,
Facebook user, I just
yeah.
wanted to say we're here to answer any questions. I know you're working with Holly just to get Diamox, but we'd love to know the situation a little better to see if we can help or if anyone else could learn from your experience. Go ahead, Cheryl.
It's one of those things where, too, different seahorses have different personalities. So just because something worked for one seahorse doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for another seahorse. And that's the other hard part is they're all a little different. And they have ways of messing with you. I had two seahorses that I raised. They were both decent size. One was a little bit smaller from two different sets of breeders. Put them in a 90-gallon to let them grow out. They were dancing. They danced all day, every day, from before dawn until after the lights went out in the evening. And they were dancing like crazy. This went on for almost 2 months. And I was sure I had a great pair that was going to make a wonderful breeding. Got up one morning, they were at opposite ends of the tank. I'm freaking
Oh,
out, thinking somebody's sick.
mm-hmm.
Something's wrong with the tank.
Let me
And I'm
guess.
watching them, and all of a sudden I realized the
They
little
don't
one
have
also
pouches.
grew a pouch.
Yep, I knew it. I knew you were gonna say that. I knew it. Yep.
And
No, I get it.
you've got to be flexible because everything about this said that they were going to be a great pair
Yep. Well,
until the
and just I know, guys, we jump around here. We start telling stories and we jump around. But for you, Facebook user who posted in the group, like I'm going through the comments now and I'm gonna start posting them. But if you have specific questions, if you want, like I can tell by talking to Holly that you've already done your research, you already know what's up, and you're just trying to figure it out. But if you want to share, not only are you welcome to share in the comments, we'd be happy to have you jump in the video. If you're willing, we can send you a link. If not, that's fine. But I want everyone to always be comfortable here, because I can tell you, oh, I screwed this up. I've got a story for you guys in a little bit after we get through this conversation about what's going on with my tank. Not good. But everybody screws up. We all come here and help each other and figure it out. So don't ever be, worried about sharing something that's going wrong, because we're here to share it and then someone else learns from it, right? Someone
And
else
most
down
of
the
us have
line.
been through it
Absolutely.
multiple times. So she did respond.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it says she came back from vacation and noticed her struggling with staying upright, cleaned the tank, and she's been struggling and floating since. So that sounds like internal gas bubble disease to
So
me.
I'm curious, you came back from vacation. What did you do while you were on vacation for the seahorses? Meaning, did you have someone coming to feed them? How long were you gone? I just literally went on a vacation myself, but I was only gone for 5 days. No, 6 days. And I had someone come feed them, and I did a massive cleaning, which messed me up now. I'll tell you now. I'll tell you about that later. But I did a massive cleaning right before I left, to try to prep things for me being gone a week. So I'm just curious what happened in the week that you were gone, because there's different things people do. A lot of people will just use live feeds if they're going on vacation for just a weekend or something. There's different things people do. So just curious how you handled your vacation, because that matters. And, a little more details, because she was struggling to stay upright. Yeah, floating ever since. It definitely, you're definitely right on. You did your research right. You are correct. I think
Looks
that,
like she was gone for 9 days and had someone stay and feed.
okay. And I'm just curious, do you feel when you came home, you said, notice she was struggling. Did the tank seem okay? Or, how was that? Because, you know, no one's going to care for our seahorses the way we do, right? Just saying. Go ahead, Ollie.
The hardest part is having to remove leftover food after
Yep.
they eat.
Yep.
And that, to me, is one of the main causes of the IGBD is uneaten food in the system somehow, whether it's in your tank stuck in rocks, like maybe they ate a piece, or maybe it's just polluting the water somehow. And that's a huge fight, even when you're not on vacation and somebody else is doing it, because
Right.
I've had this happen with my seahorses, and I've never gone on vacation.
Right.
So and also I found in my experience a lot of what happens with them with that is the result of something that happened months ago. Like a
Yep.
lot of times the IGBD doesn't show up till 4 to 5 months after you had a major pollution situation.
Yep. So
It
maybe
can take
something happened previous that's right. And I'm not blaming the person that was watching them on vacation at
no,
all.
but it
No.
happens.
But there's other stuff, like Holly
Yes.
was saying. One thing that a lot of people don't consider is that if you have, say, a sock in your filtration system, if you have the sock, you think, oh, that's catching all the excess food. That's catching all the stuff and not letting it go back through, right? Great. But if you're not changing that sock, that
It's sitting in the
waste
water.
is still sitting in the water and still affecting the water, right? So all the bacteria and all that stuff is still happening. And it's just stuff we just don't even think about. I'm guilty of that myself. The sock thing, I'm very guilty of forgetting to change out the socks. And then all of a sudden, the tank starts, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I forgot to change my socks. And I won't, there's not a big story. I'll just tell you guys, after I came back from vacation, before I went to vacation, and then when I came back, I did some major cleaning, And now my tank's a damn mess because I cleaned too much, right? I went and took the rocks out and scrubbed them. I know better. I know that that's the worst thing to do. I didn't care. I wanted the tank to look better again. I wanted the seahorses to be happy. And now my tank is like covered in, it's not even algae. It's the, where you look on the glass and it's just green, but it's not growing. Do you get, you know what I'm talking, like film or something? The, just,
Mhm.
anyways. So I'm
Yeah, like,
dealing with that. I hear you. It's not fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, she said tank seemed okay when she got back. I'm just curious, like maybe if you want to, we could dive into how your tank's set up. Because usually when we have someone say that their seahorse got some sort of GVD issue, it's that they don't have a skimmer rated high enough, or um, or something occurred, as Holly said months before. What are some other things we've run into, you guys?
I've had, well, for me, what I run into is food getting stuck
Mm-hmm.
in my equipment along the way, like in the overflow box. I've mentioned this before because mine is like they're acrylic boxes in one of my tanks, and it's like this. It's twisty, and uneaten mysis has gotten stuck inside of that, and I have to flush it out now and then, but it's hard, I can't even see it
Right.
until it starts to build up. So I've got that. I've had it stuck in my bio balls in the sump, before, and clean them, flush it out, and then had stuff get in the tank from me cleaning the sump. Um, Also, food can get stuck. One reason I don't do rocks anymore, I used to always have a problem with the food would get stuck in crevices between rocks and things where I didn't notice it or couldn't get to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of those types of things contribute to those
Well,
kind of issues, and not all of them are completely solvable.
right.
But oh crap, something happened. Like sometimes, even in my bare bottom, sterile looking tank here that is in the room with me, my tiki tank where I used to grow out the babies, I keep that tank really, really clean.
Yep.
After I feed them, I siphon up everything I can see in that tank and turn the pumps back on. And invariably, I'll walk through the room a half an hour or an hour later,
And there's some
darn pieces of food laying
Yep.
on the floor. Where did they come from? They weren't there when I siphoned.
Right.
So I know if something didn't get noticed and
Right.
it's sitting there for a day or two and
Yeah.
somebody decides to snick it,
Or even
that
it's just
may
sitting
cause
there.
a problem, or just the fact that it's sitting there polluting
Yeah.
the tank. I
Yep.
think in my experience has been the
The problem.
biggest
Yeah.
problem and danger with my seahorses.
I just want to throw in real quick that I completely agree. And one of the things I noticed and I've complained about is that it seems like the more the even the best brands of food, it seems like there's more and more smaller tiny pieces that the
Tiny,
seahorses won't eat, that are just bad for the tank, right? So what I
yes,
did, upon Ray, I think it was Ray, maybe somebody suggested getting a bigger,
a
not
sieve,
a
yeah,
bigger net, but
like
or a
a
sieve,
sieve,
right,
a
that had
strainer,
wider holes so that
like
the big
kitchen
pieces
strainer.
didn't. Right. A strainer is the basic thing. So the one that I had, oh, Cheryl left us, but the
Uh-oh.
one that I had was like a brine shrimp uh, hatchery net. And so every little piece of gunk
Yeah,
within the food
but
was still
stay.
going into the tank, even though I was rinsing it. Once I upgraded, I'll go get my net and show you guys. It's got much wider holes in the net. And
Mhm.
so only the big pieces stay and all the little crap goes down the drain. And then once I rinse the food, I've only got big pieces. I have so much easier a time now cleaning
Mhm.
up after they eat because
Mhm.
they will eat all the big pieces, right?
Yeah,
So
they
it was
want
all
the big
those little
pieces.
pieces causing me trouble. Just I don't know if that's something that might help you, but we're just kind of trying
Yeah,
to
it's it's
and
it's just yeah,
yeah, and
it's frustrating, yeah, trying to clean up after them and keeping everything
yep,
clean, and sometimes you think you're doing enough and everything looks great, and
and
something
then
happens
something goes wrong.
anyway,
Right, right.
so
And for anybody new watching, you don't usually run into these problems. Like I'm curious, I don't know the name of the Facebook user. It says
oh,
Younga.
it's Kelly. Her name's Kelly.
Oh, Kelly. Hey, I'm
Yeah,
Kelly too.
Kelly and Kelly.
So, Kelly, I'm curious how long you've kept seahorses. Because a lot of times we focus on Wine Wednesday on a problem, right? And we
Mhm.
talk endlessly about how to alleviate that problem, how we've all experienced it. But then someone new might be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go through that. I just want to be clear. Usually you don't see any problems for a year. Okay. You can keep seahorses for a year. You can keep seahorses forever and not have problems. But
I've one almost 5 years old now, and
right,
he's outlived other ones that had problems, so,
right.
like, some of them will get sick and some of them
I'm just
don't.
saying, if you're just looking to set up a seahorse tank, don't be scared. The key is prevention, right? So the
Mhm,
key is setting up properly, making sure you have adequate filtration, making sure you have adequate tank volume. And if you do that, you're not going to see these problems like ever. And
mhm,
even if you do, a year down the road, we'll help you fix them. But I just
mhm.
don't want anybody to be afraid to keep seahorses because
Yeah,
it's very simple if you set up properly, right? I mean, it's just simple, at least for the first year or so, I should say.
it always sticks in my head something that Chris Carey said on here once.
I'm still here. Go
Trust
ahead.
me. And he said, "You gotta remember they're fish."
Right.
At the end of the day, they are fish, and I've kept freshwater fish for a long time, and sometimes things happen with your fish that you don't know why you lost them, or one gets sick and just dies, and the other are all fine. And seahorses are kind of special. They're different from other fish, so I think we forget that sometimes.
Well,
You
yeah,
know
because
about them. That
they need a
they are
different.
fish.
They are fish, and they are hardier than people think, and that's why I
Yeah,
keep saying that.
especially
They're
physically.
not difficult to care for. They're not difficult to keep. It's
Mhm,
just that when people just want seahorses and throw them in a tank that they're not
mhm,
suited for, then they end up having problems. I'm sure you didn't do this, Facebook user. I'm not saying that.
mhm,
Kelly, sorry. I'm sure you
mhm,
didn't do that, Kelly. I'm just saying for anybody else watching. If you're thinking about setting up seahorse tank and you want to keep seahorses, just follow our guidelines or the
mhm.
recommended guidelines, and you really shouldn't see trouble. It's when, I mean,
But
everybody
stuff
does things differently,
happens,
but
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like I said, I mean, I've set up everything, the way it should be, the way I learned how, and I still have stuff happen now and then, but it doesn't happen to everybody. Like I said, I don't lose all the seahorses, maybe one, maybe two, here, there, just like any other fish.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure. Well, in my case, every time I lost a seahorse, I figured out why. I mean, I'm
Mhm,
not. I'm saying you're right. Sometimes shit just
mhm.
happens, but in my case, I always figured out why. It was a temp spike.
Yeah,
It was that I wasn't taking care of the tank. It was that my skimmer stopped working. It was
yep,
that whatever. I wasn't doing my water changes. There's usually a reason. So I'm just
yeah,
saying yes, stuff happens, and sometimes you just lose a seahorse, but
Yeah.
don't be afraid to keep seahorses. It's just like keeping any other fish. You just set up for them properly, and you shouldn't have these problems.
And
And when you
you
do have these problems,
usually know
we're
why.
here.
Like
We're here to help you figure out how to get Dimox, to help you figure out how to fix the seahorse, right? To the best of our ability. So, don't be afraid, is all I'm saying. I wish more people kept seahorses. Still to
Mhm.
this day, when I tell people I keep seahorses, they're like, "Oh my gosh, are you serious?" I did a seahorse pumpkin, and people are like, "Oh my gosh, they're real?" Yes, they're real. Oh my gosh, they're at my house. Come on. So, but yeah. Um,
And that was a
and they
beautiful pumpkin, by the way, too.
Thank
I
you.
was
Thank you.
impressed with your artwork. I showed it to
Uh,
Scott. He loved it.
awesome. Awesome. Um, yeah, go on the group to see it if you want to. But um, anyways, Kelly, I know we're just rambling on and on about different stuff because I'm trying to help everybody. But if you have specific questions, please ask. It sounds to me like you already did your research.
Mhm.
You just need the Diamox. Just as Holly said, make sure that you treat also for the underlying problem.
Antibiotics, yeah.
Yeah. The
Because
and
I don't know, if she caught us earlier when we were discussing it, but Diamox is kind of like taking aspirin for a headache. It treats the symptoms, but not the cause. So it helps with the floating. It'll stop the seahorse from floating, hopefully, within 3 to 5 days, sometimes a little longer. I've had it take a little longer to work, but it's not treating the actual disease that caused the seahorse to be floating. You need to use antibiotics for that. I
right.
um I use sulfaplex and canaplex mostly when I can't get Furan 2. Furan
Yep.
2 is my favorite, or what is the chemical of it? Nitrofuran something.
Nitrofurazone or something like that. No,
Nitrofurazone.
yep,
And
that's
that's what Furan 2 is. So that's a good one if you can get it.
yep,
But yeah, you need to make sure and use an antibiotic too, because the floating is just because of the infection.
absolutely, absolutely. And let's see. And I totally understand too, Kelly. This Kelly went on vacation too and was worried as hell when I came back because years ago when I went on vacation, I came back and the person watching my tanks forgot to turn a pump back on. And I came home to, sadly, a bad tank. I won't go into details, but I get it. It's scary to go on a vacation. That's why we talk all the time about what you can do when you go on vacation. But it sounds like you did everything right and you had a sitter. And yeah, so we're here to answer any other questions, but I don't want to keep talking about the same point. So I did get a contact for a vet that does virtual visits. So from Andrea. So please let me know. Contact me personally if you need that contact because I don't want to just put it out there. We don't want to get him in trouble, but definitely I can help you. And Bonnie asked, total side note here, do any of you ladies have a cleanup crew with your seahorses?
I have in the past. Right now, I just have one little blue legged hermit crab left. I've lost all the others. They got old and passed away because I've had my tank for a while. But I used to have snails and hermit crabs, and I even considered my goby part of my
Yep.
cleanup crew. I had peppermint shrimp, and I don't have cleanup crew now, like I said, because what I kind of learned about the cleanup crew is you can't really rely on them for cleanup. They're pets all in themselves. They help, they'll eat some uneaten food, but they don't solve your problems. You still have to clean up, because another thing about the cleanup crew is they learn from you feeding the seahorses, and they
Sure.
start to think they are seahorses, and they
Well,
don't.
I wouldn't say that, but go ahead.
So
Well, what you're
I
saying,
had
I think
crabs. They don't want the old food that's laying around. They wait to eat till you feed the seahorses, and then they eat the new food, along with the seahorses, because they know the seahorses are going to get fed at 6 a.m. or whatever. So
it's just, I
who
know
puts
you're,
leftovers when they know there's good stuff to be had?
when I tell people that have aptasia problems in their tank and they want to use peppermint shrimp as a
Mhm.
response to that, I tell them the key is ask the store that you're buying the peppermint shrimp from, or the person
Yeah.
or whatever, to not feed the peppermint shrimp that day, right? Because in my tank, I had an aptasia explosion because I added something I shouldn't have, and it had aptasia, and all of a sudden I had aptasia everywhere. And I wanted to use peppermint shrimp because some of the other options like nudibranchs and all that would have taken too long. And I
Yeah.
watched one of my seahorses get stung in the face. She survived,
Aw.
everything was fine, but it was awful. If it had been a smaller seahorse, I would have been more worried. And my point being, I wanted to use peppermint shrimp. It had worked for me in a reef tank. I knew it worked for aptasia if you got the right species of peppermint shrimp and if they're
They
hungry.
have to
And
be
that's the
hungry.
key. Because if you feed them and put them in the tank and then you expect them to clean up the waste, they're gonna wait for the next feeding because it's
Yeah.
better food. They are scavengers, of
Yeah.
course. But if you're hungry,
If they
and you've
don't
got
have to
stuff in the, or
scavenge,
no, if you got food in the fridge, but there's a pizza hot and fresh and piping on the table, which are you going to
right?
eat, right? I mean,
Right?
I don't even like pizza, but you know my point. So, anyways, in my case, I was able to ask the store not to feed the peppermint shrimp. I put them in. They wiped out the aptasia. I did minimal feedings for the seahorses that week.
Mhm.
Call me bad, whatever. I was trying to make
Yeah.
sure that they cleaned up the aptasia, and they did. And
Yeah.
then after the aptasia was gone, boy, they stopped being scavengers and they were stealing food from the seahorses. But that doesn't
Yeah.
matter. They served their purpose and they were my pets
Yeah.
too, then, as Holly said. But
Yeah.
yeah, with cleanup crew, as Ray always says, you have to remember that, like in a reef tank, right? You have cleanup crew because you don't want the algae growing on the coral, or you don't want the algae growing on the glass. Like I have cleanup crew in every one of my seahorse tanks. I do snails. I don't do anything else, but I have tons of different types of snails.
Mhm.
And I use them to try to minimize what I have to clean up, right? Because I know that because my light's not great and I leave it on too long, and with seahorses, the feeding thing is such a big deal, and I can't get all the excess food. I overcompensate with water changes and filtration, but I know that, they feed more than other fish. So you've got more stuff going on in the tank. So I use cleanup crew to try to keep the algae under control. But what you have to remember is they are still an organism in the tank. So even though they're eating the algae and they're still pooping it out, right? Not the
Mhm.
algae, but you get my point.
Yeah.
If you use an algae scrubber, you're growing algae and then you're removing it from the tank. So you're removing the nutrients that's within it, you're removing the problem and taking it off the scrubber. With a cleanup crew, they're eating it and you don't see it anymore, but it's still in the tank within them, right? So it's just, I don't think a cleanup crew's bad. I use them in every single tank, but I don't rely on them and I don't pretend in my own head that because I don't see algae when I have a ton of snails, that there's not a problem, right? And if I
Mhm.
see algae in a tank with snails, I definitely know there's a problem. I'm dealing with it now. So no judgment because I'm dealing with it
Mhm.
now. But it's more to do with my lighting and my
Mhm.
laziness. So
Mhm.
if that makes any sense. Cheryl, you don't
Yeah.
keep any cleanup crew, do you?
One thing to keep in mind is when you have a tank with sand and a lot of rock and a lot of plants, they are going to be harder to maintain because there's a lot more room for detritus to get trapped and
Sure.
stuck. If you are using a bare bottom tank and with non living plants or plastic plants that you can remove on a regular basis and thoroughly clean, your tank is going to stay much cleaner. The difference, though, is comes down to what you can do with the flow. You're going to need higher flow if you're going to run a tank with a lot of stuff in it. Bottom line.
To blow the crap out of the rocks and stuff.
Right. Well, and let me see. I see some more comments I will come back to, but I saw something about black hair algae somewhere. I swear I did. Maybe I'm
Oh,
crazy.
oh no, Kelly said she had some black algae in her tank about a month ago, and it looks like she says she's had the seahorses for 6 months, so
Okay.
they're fairly
They are
new.
fairly new. Well, I would say too, then you're dealing with a newer tank, which is also, you know, trying to figure it out for sure. And when I had
Mhm.
black hair algae in my reed eye tank, I had so much trouble with that tank. And it was because I mean, and I'm not talking about your situation, I'm talking about mine. But in that situation, I was keeping them in a tank without a sump, without a skimmer, and well, it had a hang on the back skimmer, but those are worthless.
Yeah.
And I couldn't keep up with the maintenance. I ended up moving them to a bigger tank and stopped having problems. So I don't know your situation, but you might want to look at, I don't know your tank setup. How big's the tank? What kind of it does it have a sump? What
And
kind of
the
filtration are you using?
filtration, yeah, what
Yeah.
kind of filtration? One thing that reminds me of when I had my first seahorses years ago, another round with seahorses many years ago, I had a canister filter.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that canister filters are not for me because they are they are such hard work. I mean, to keep up with a seahorse tank with a canister filter, you have to clean it out, and replace those pads and things inside of it. And you have to open it up, and it's a mess. And it's just a lot easier to do seahorses with a sump, in my opinion. I found out after I switched to a sump years later. It's
Well,
I
but
used to have
not if
was
you're not
but the
cleaning
key
your
is
canister often enough, which is
right,
easy to not do because frankly it's a bitch.
right.
So if you put that off too long and you're not that detritus and stuff is building up in there and you're getting high organics from
Well,
that.
and the problem is there's so
Real
many
initiative.
equations. Like if you're seeing
Yeah.
algae, it could be just the lighting is off. I literally
And that's
experienced that
what I
recently.
have. I deal
Yeah,
with algae right under where my lights are. So every week when I do my water change, I'm removing algae by hand.
sure,
I'm pulling,
sure.
I'm pulling it, which is fine. Algae doesn't really hurt anything.
No, it
Yeah,
doesn't. And I was
it's
just
just ugly.
I just always, if I start seeing algae in my tank, if I don't know, like if it's a tank that I've had for years and I start seeing
Mhm,
algae, then I know I'm messing up somewhere. If it's a
mhm,
newer tank, then I have to investigate. Is it the lighting? Is it, my filtration system, all that. But in an older tank, then that's an indication for
mhm,
me there's a problem. I'm not doing something right. But in a newer tank, it's different.
mhm,
But also, like Cheryl said earlier, you're going to have an easier time with a bare bottom fake plant tank.
mhm.
While I would agree with that, I think there's something to be said. The more guests we've had on this channel, the more people
Yeah.
we've talked to, there's something to be said for if you can create a true ecosystem. The problem with
Mhm.
that for us average people is knowing every equation in that complete
Yes.
ecosystem, right? So
Yes.
it's easy to dump, phyto in your tank or bacteria in your tank or whatever, But
Mhm.
knowing that everything's feeding everything and you have every part of that equation is really hard. So someone that's got a really great background in reef keeping that understands, oh, well, if you have phyto, you need the copepods, and then you need this, and then you need that. That, I don't think that that's a bad thing. But someone setting up for the first time, it definitely is easier to just do it simple, keep it simple, stupid kind of thing, you know? I get it though. My tank, my first Seahorse tank was filled with macros, rocks. I mean, it was beautiful and I loved it. And along the way, I had problems and I figured them out, right? I only lost one of my original four Seahorses to like illness. Of course, they're all gone now, but I only lost one to illness. The other three, the two of them bred for me for years and was great. And along the way, I had the 29-gallon tank, four Seahorses, way too many. Tons of macros though, and I constantly had problems. I was constantly dealing with cyano. The macros would, die and release spores. I'd have all sorts of trouble. I'd have to do massive water changes, but it was a smaller tank, so it wasn't a big deal. When I added a sump onto the tank and an algae scrubber, things changed and they were better. And then I progressed to a bigger tank. There's nothing, I'm just trying to make the point. Even if you're having trouble right now, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. You're going to figure it out. And as long as you keep trying to do better, I don't think there's anything wrong with any way you set up a Seahorse
Mhm.
tank. As long as you're not putting them with, something that would eat them or hurt them.
Yeah.
Right?
You
Well,
kind
the
of
thing
learn as
is,
you go what works best for you and your
yeah,
Right.
schedule and what you're able to do. I mean, for me, what I started with was rocks and, like I said, the cleanup crew, lots of other creatures and sand and, all kinds of things in there. But what I found was all of that was very high maintenance for me. And, I'm a career person, I didn't have the time or energy to deal with all of that on top of life. So I found it was a lot easier to do the bare bottom, the artificial decorations and
Whereas
like
though, on the other side of the spectrum, and that's where I'm right there with you, Holly, now. My tank is bare bottom. It does have rock, but it's rock that I've had for years that it has
yeah,
been, it's not live rock. I made it
yeah, it's
live.
not going through processes.
Right. And fake stuff because it's
Uh-huh.
so much easier. But I just want to, put out there for anybody new that's thinking about setting up for Seahorses or just has nothing wrong. My first tank, I wanted the beauty. It
Yeah,
wasn't now I want to just interact with my Seahorses. I
yeah,
just want to have my babies and I want them to have babies. So a
yeah,
sterile environment's better. But in the beginning, I wanted a tank, right? So sometimes when
mhm,
we talk, I think we forget that. Telling them
yeah,
it's easier to do it sterile is the truth. But if you
yeah.
want to tank with creatures, it's more work, but it's worth it if that's what you want,
And
right?
it's really cool. I mean, I love it
Yeah.
because there's so much to watch, things
Yes.
going on, your corals and the little things that come out of the rock. And yeah, so
And
I,
watching the seahorse and a peppermint shrimp or a snail or,
yeah.
interact and
And
watching the
I
seahorse on a
still have my
gorgonian. Oh
goby.
God.
My
Yeah.
goby, I have a blue spotted watchman goby, which I got actually, he came in before the seahorses, but right before the seahorses. So he's not much older than them. But he's come to think he is a seahorse. He eats like the seahorses. He eats from the turkey baster. That's
Right.
that's how he gets
Right.
fed. And he started out, like I said, the idea was that he would be cleanup crew,
Yeah.
but he doesn't want to clean up. He knows when the seahorses eat. He's
Yep.
like, okay, it's time to eat. He comes out of his little cave and he looks at me like, lady, I see you giving them food with that turkey baster. How about putting a little over here? And
Yeah.
he eats it. And he does. I hold the turkey baster, I squirt some food out, and he comes and he eats the food. And he's
Yep.
like the seahorse. If that food falls on the ground, he will not eat it.
That's
So he's no good as a cleanup crew.
right. So I'm sorry I got distracted. Going back to Bonnie's question, I personally keep cleanup crew just to help me with algae because my light's shit and I don't want to try to fix it. And also I think they're cool. Like Holly said, they're really cool. They have a job.
That's
They're
why
not
I
bad.
always kept it. I like them.
Nothing wrong with them. But are they necessary for a seahorse tank? No. Do
They're a
they
lot of fun.
contribute? Yeah. Are they fun? Yes. And do they contribute? Yes, absolutely. And they're more to make the tank active. It's again totally
Yeah.
depends on what you
More
want
stuff to
in your
look
tank.
at. You can't
Yeah,
trust them. You can't put in a
they're not an
cleanup
answer.
crew and think that you don't have to siphon after the
Right.
seahorses eat because you got a cleanup crew.
Right. You still have to do the work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Cheryl, I think you have a story too about peppermint shrimp, right? Like again, we're talking about the difference in what you want. If you're trying to breed, Cheryl, didn't you have a story about peppermint shrimp going after fry?
Oh yeah, those were peppermint. They weren't peppermint. They were ghost shrimp. Ghost
Ah,
shrimp. But anyway, yeah. Every time a male would go into labor, the darn shrimp would come out and head for the top of the tank and wait and start collecting and eating the newborn fry as they were heading to the surface.
oh,
And that's when I came to the realization that shrimp are not necessarily one of your better ideas in the adult seahorse tank that are actively reproducing because it doesn't take the shrimp long to figure out when the fry are coming. And as soon as the seahorses start heading toward the top, the fry start coming out, and the shrimp have already figured it out and are waiting at the top of the tank.
well,
Yeah,
But all these creatures are individuals, I've
yep,
learned too. So some will do things that others
right,
don't. Because when my seahorse Sandy was having his babies, I had peppermint shrimp in the tank at the time. I had three of them at one time, and none of them tried to eat the baby seahorses.
yep. I never had them either.
Nobody tried. It was, and I was worried about it because I always read even seahorses will eat baby
yeah, yeah.
They will.
seahorses.
It depends.
But I remember he actually gave birth one time in the feeding station, and Candy was sitting there having breakfast, and she was surprised, but she picked her way around the
Yeah,
baby
they're all
seahorses.
different. It depends.
She wouldn't eat them. She was
Yeah.
looking for the frozen
I,
places.
I,
And the peppermint shrimp did not eat the baby seahorses. What was interesting to me was when he was giving birth, especially his big batch, the
Mm-hmm.
ones where I had like 163 of them were born over 2 days. Those 2 days, everybody in the tank was excited. All the fish, all the shrimp, everybody was following him
that's
around
because
Hmm.
she was running
like
around like a
they were
seahorse with her tail
excited.
off.
Yeah, I never experienced
but
that, but
but nobody was trying to eat the
Yeah.
babies. They were just all curious about what was going on,
hmm.
and they were excited about what was happening, but nobody was eating anybody, which I found interesting. But they seemed to know,
Yeah, something was up. Sure.
you know.
Well, and I would just I
Mhm.
the whole point to our, we're just sharing community here and we're just sharing our stories, but the whole point I just want to bring back to home is that it totally depends on what you want. And that's why when you bring us a problem or you bring us a question like about cleanup crew or about a problem with a seahorse, we're going to ask you, like how's your tank set up? It's not any kind of judgment. It's just what's your goal in the tank, right? And have you set up properly with filtration and such? because maybe we can help you up your filtration so that you don't have problems anymore, no matter what kind of tank you've set up. Because it does depend. It depends on if you're trying to breed. It depends on if you're trying to make a beautiful tank. You can do things so many different ways with seahorses and succeed. It's just about knowing that if you're depending on macros, you have to make sure that you're pruning them, or what's the word? It's not pruning. That's for plant. You have to make sure you're
I
harvesting.
just think of it as, yeah.
Because if you're not harvesting,
Somebody just posted too. Can you use a couple of good hang-on back filters on a large species seahorse tank instead of a sump? A sump sounds too complicated to set up. In the long run, a sump is easier to maintain
A lot easier.
rather than
It's
using
way
wait,
hang-on
wait, wait,
back.
than
wait,
I
wait,
ever
wait, wait.
thought
Let Cheryl.
it would be.
Hang on, Holly. Let Cheryl say what she wants. Go ahead. Repeat yourself, Cheryl.
I'm sorry?
Repeat yourself.
I can't understand you.
Sorry. What did you say was great about a sump in the long run?
Well, the sump is easier to clean. It isn't anywhere near as limited as a hang-on back filter. You're not having to change equipment constantly on them. I mean, you can get away with a lot of stuff with a sump that if you tried it with a hang-on back filter, you'd kill everything. And over the years, I started out with well, basically the canister filters. Then I switched to the Blueville FX5 with the great big monsters that they built years ago. And then ultimately I started building my own sumps. And I don't have every tank I have is sumped, because I can go in there, I can pull out equipment. Everything is in there because I've got my protein skimmers, I've got my K1 media reactors, I've got different types of activated carbon in there. I've got a ton of stuff in each sump, but all I have to do is reach in and pick it up, set it down, and put a new one in, and I'm done. That's
so for you, it's more about having more space that's not in the tank where you can do filtration. You can fix it if it's a problem. You can do something else if it's a problem. You can use multiple types of filtration. But I think that what people are scared of, including me when I first started, I didn't have a sump. I currently don't have a sump.
Too.
Is the plumbing of it and actually doing a sump. It sounds so big and so much. So what would you say to someone new? Because like I'm over that now. I love sumps.
Well,
I have one tank with a sump, one tank without. I have an all-in-one and a tank with a sump, and I love them both. But the tank with the sump is easier for definite sure. But plumbing it was not easy. So what would you say to someone worried about that?
It's one of those things where it's bursted. I mean, it took me a while. I didn't start out with sumps. I started building my own sumps well into it. But another factor is the average person is going to pick up maybe a couple of seahorses. Then they're going to want more seahorses. They may want a bigger tank, and the whole thing tends to snowball on you. And with a sump, because I raised the seahorses, I can set up a 58-gallon tank with a sump and slowly add a half a dozen or so 2.5-inch seahorses that I've raised, and end up I can go from 0 to 100 within a week without ever blowing the filtration on it.
Yep. So again, it does depend on your goals. But again, I'll tell my story real quick, that I started off with a 29-gallon tank that I shoved 4 seahorses in with a bunch of macros. And it was gorgeous, and it worked for about 6 months to a year. And then I started having major problems. And I had to add a sump to that tank. And then I ended up having babies. Well, they had babies, not me. And so then I had to upgrade to a bigger tank with a sump, and etc. So again, it totally depends on what you want. But even if you just want to keep seahorses, you don't want to have their fry, you don't want to raise their fry, you just want a couple seahorses to make a pretty tank. If you don't set up properly filtration wise, you're going to run into problems within a year. I mean, that's the truth,
Well,
right? We've all upgraded because of it.
it's one of those things too. The average person is still out there. The seahorses can't handle flow. Excuse me. I
Sure.
watched the seahorses swim directly into a return, the flow from a
Sure.
return, get blasted across the tank doing somersaults. They're doing spiraling away from it because of the force of the water, just to turn around and do it again.
Sure. Flow is a big issue, and making sure you have enough flow in a seahorse tank is huge. But back to the sump conversation, I would say yes, you can do a seahorse tank without a sump. Just understand, and I'm so sorry I haven't gotten the videos out or the articles, but I'm doing that right now. I set up the all-in-one tank just to prove that you could do a seahorse tank without a sump. I can tell you it's a lot more work, a lot more water changes. I don't count on the skimmer to do as much as it does in a tank with a sump with a much larger skimmer, much larger rated skimmer. So in my all-in-one, I know I have to be more careful. It's not as much water volume. So if there's an error, it's huge. Whereas in a bigger tank with a sump, it's not as crisis, right? In my all-in-one, I have to make sure I change the sock religiously. I have to make sure I clean up the food every time. There's no skipping because I'm tired. I have to make sure I'm doing my water changes. And in fact, Ray schooled me recently that the reason I was starting to see problems now that the tank's over a year old is because I'm not doing big enough water changes, right? Because I'm not used to having a tank without a sump that has all that equipment, all that extra water. It's a cushion, right? And it gives you more freedom to do whatever you want to do because it will compensate for your errors. Whereas in a smaller tank without a sump, you got to be on it or you're going to have problems.
Well, the other thing to look at too, is depending on the size and age of the seahorses will determine what kind of flow you want. And with a sump, it's much easier. I have ball valves on all my sumps, on my returns off of the pumps. And that way I can drain water off or add more water into the main tank, depending on what I've got in that particular tank. It gives me a lot more flexibility.
So Zen Ginger
and I
is
would
here.
Say,
wait, hang on.
Be afraid to do it. They're not that hard.
Ray's here.
Wait, hang on. Wait, what did Holly say?
I was going to say, don't be afraid to do a sump. They're really not that hard. And once you have it set up, you won't want to go back. They're actually a lot easier.
My cat's
if
liking
you're worried
too.
about the part, have somebody come in and plumb it for you.
My cat's
that knows.
My cat's like to get into them.
Wait. Time out. Cheryl, we're talking over each other. Holly, you were saying.
Yeah, so have somebody plumb it for you that understands that type of thing. Like my husband doesn't do fish, but he understands plumbing and the flow of water well enough that he was able to plumb my tank. You might have somebody from a local fish store or an aquarium club or somebody that can help you set it up and plumb it for you, and then it won't be hard for you to figure out how to run it and maintain it. They're not hard. To me, like Kelly was saying, the plumbing part can be daunting if you're not good with that kind of thing, but if you have somebody else to do that part, it's not hard to maintain it after that. And I've had hang on back stuff and it just doesn't do the job in my experience.
Right.
And
I would say too, if you are preparing for seahorses and setting up your tank, get a plumbed, get a pre-plumbed tank. Then you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it. If you've already set up for seahorses and you're like, I'm not gonna, there's no way. Like in my case, I had the 29-gallon and there was no hole in the tank. There was no way to plumb the tank. I had to add a sump with an overflow box. You can do it, but if you know in advance, okay, I'm going to want a big Seahorse tank. I'm going to want to keep them for a long time, then maybe set up with a sump to begin with. You can do it both ways. I can help you either way, but it's easier if you have a sump because of the water volume, because of the, different ways you can help with flow, as Cheryl was pointing out, and because of all the filtration you can use in that sump. In the all-in-one,
They
I've
need a
got
lot of
4
filtration.
compartments and that's it. So I have to pick and choose. Do I want a bigger skimmer? Do I want a UV sterilizer? Do I want a sock? Do I want aquachar, a char chamber? What do I want? And I ended up putting my char chamber, my Robert King char chamber, in the tank. Honestly, because the seahorses love it and they hitch to the airline and they love to have bubbles going up their butts. But besides that, if I had wanted to use it in a chamber, I'm limited. So it's just more freedom. And if you're setting up for seahorses, I would definitely advise going for a sump, but I can help you if you're not. And Ray's here, and Zen Ginger is too. I saw you, Zen Ginger. Hi.
I just
Ray.
wanted to comment on sumps. Too many people, when they hear sump, and if they have any kind of an idea that a sump is this container and it's got all these baffles and stuff in it, a sump does not have to be that complicated. A sump can
Nope.
be a plain tank. It's for seahorse purposes, especially. The main purpose of it is to add water volume to the system to make it more forgiving.
Yes.
And in so doing, the return flow gives a boost to the water flow in the tank itself. Plus, you can hang a sock on the overflow so that you're trapping stuff. And you can also use things if you're into old school things. I put all my rock in the sump rather than in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you put the rock in the tank, it tends to turn the seahorses dark.
Yes.
Um,
Agree.
so basically, don't be afraid of using a sump. And again, it was just mentioned a minute ago, but if you haven't set a thing up yet, plan on drilling the tank, having the tank drilled, so that you don't have to use a
Overflow.
siphon overflow.
Overflow boxes.
Yeah, the overflow boxes suck, and Holly can
Well,
tell you that too. But
Once you get used to them, they're
About
okay.
that.
right,
I
but
had 4
I
tanks
just
with
know that
overflow
every time
boxes.
with the overflow box, Ray, every time I know my first tank, like I said, I had to use one because I couldn't drill it; it was already set up, and the siphoning to get it restarted, if it ever stopped, was a pain in the boutoir.
Well, that's
Like
because you
sticking
didn't
the
learn
hose
how to
up
do it
the
right.
hose, huh?
That's because you didn't learn how to do it right. You should be
I
able to get that
probably
siphon
didn't.
going in a minute's time.
Okay, so wait a minute.
I'm good at mine
Wait a
now.
minute, I want to know. So, what we're talking about, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm talking about a tank that is not drilled. So, you have to add an overflow box, one of the boxes that, in my case, I know they've gotten more sophisticated now, but in my old age, when I had one, it was a U tube, right? So, there was the tank, the sump was down here, and to get the water from the tank to the sump, I had to have a little box called an overflow box,
Okay.
and then it had a tube that was like literally a U upside down. And which it worked, it was fascinating, it was amazing. But if I turned the tank off, all of a sudden the water in the U tube would be gone. And
Hey,
so what I would have
that's
to
not right.
do is I would have to stick a airline, long airline, up through the U tube because there were in the U tube you'd see water right here. I'm sorry, I'm not doing very good pictorial or whatever, but a U tube, right? So it's a big U tube, and there would be water here in the box, water here where it's going down to the sump, but up here there'd be air, and that would make it not work. Is the bottom line. So I would have to stick an
There's an
airline.
easy way to fix that so it works and you don't have to worry about it.
I want to hear about it, but I want to tell you what I did when I didn't know about the answer. So I would have to stick an airline
I ran
up into the part where there was air, and the airline would be right there, and you would have to, well, in my case, I didn't know better. I would suck
on
it, And
Yeah.
then the water would start flowing and it would be great. But half the time you got water in your mouth and it was a pain in the ass. All right. Go ahead,
Okay, I
Cheryl.
want to comment here.
Okay, go ahead.
There's no way a properly set up overflow is going to lose the siphon just by stopping the tank, stopping the
Why
pump.
do you say that?
Well, because the water is high enough on both halves, on the back side of the tank and obviously on the front side. They're both half enough or high enough to cover the ends of the U-tube. And as long as you don't expose one end to air, the air is not going to get into it, other than eventually you can get some build up there over a period of time and you'll have to suck some out because it's restricting the flow, but it's not going to block the flow and stop it. The only way you should have that tube with any air in it that's going to stop the siphoning is if you remove the tube.
Yeah.
So wait, so what you're saying is, in my case, and I'm perfectly okay with admitting this is the first time I ever tried it. But so what you're saying is I didn't have one of the sides high enough.
Right, probably the backside. That's why usually on the flows there's a tube that sticks in the hole for it to run down into the tank, and that tube is what keeps the level high enough to keep that from losing its siphon.
I think that's what
Exactly.
I think that's what Cheryl's getting ready to tell us. And in my case, this is a long time ago, guys. There was no tube running into the tank. There was none of this crap they're about to say, which is great. I'm glad we figured it out because in my case, it was a pre-made thing. Like there was no adjust. I couldn't have made the backside be higher. It was pre-made. It was, I had to fix it every time there was air.
My boxes are not tubes at all.
Right.
My box is just a box. There is no tubes. It's all acrylic and it's like this.
Which is so weird.
Cheryl,
I want to know what, Ray?
It's basically a tube, but it's just not a round tube.
Right.
Yeah. It's like more like a slot.
Yeah.
I hate that about it. It's so narrow, but it does flow most of the time. I rarely have to do the sucking part.
Well, when you do the sucking, you can stop it from getting in your mouth by using a longer siphon tube.
That is true. I learned that also.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right. If you ever do have to suck a siphon, use as long a piece of airline as you can. That way you never get it in your mouth. Cheryl, what were you saying about how you can fix that? By running a line where?
Okay. Well, you can actually put a drain off tube for air inside the U-tube if you're using an external going into a sump, and it will stop the flow. It's basically the same principle of what Ray was talking about. It stops the flow and keeps a constant water volume in there. Another thing you can do if you want to get really fun, have real fun, is you can put a ball valve in there and shut off the flow. Or in my tanks, in my sumps, all the pumps have a ball valve on them that I can adjust. So I can adjust the amount of flow depending on what I've got in the tank. So the flow is totally adjustable, both on and off.
Sure. But back to the U-tubes, if you're in that situation, guys, I feel your pain because it's a pain in the butt. And this is, again, another case of when you're setting up for seahorses, decide what you want. Decide how long you want to keep them, what your goal is. And if your goal is to keep them long-term, like Bonnie's asking some amazing questions, but cleanup crew is completely up to you, right? A sump is completely up to you. But if you want to keep them long-term, a sump is a better way to do it. I'm doing it in an all-in-one. I'm working it out. I'm having complications. It's more work. You can do it. But if you want an easy way to do it, just do a sump, right? I think that's the
you
the
can
2
easily
cents.
you can easily build your own sumps. It's easy enough to buy the tank. In fact, I think I bought every 29-gallon tank in San Antonio that was used for $10 or less. And then I'd plumb them, turn them into sumps. Uh, I bought an old acrylic tank that was falling apart, cut that and used that to make the baffles for it. And by the time I finished building them, I probably had no more than $25 at the most into each sump that I built.
Right. So
And
anybody out there that wants to know how to build a sump, Cheryl is here at your disposal. If you're like me, I'm like, what the hell did she just say? What? Baffles and drilling, and no, I'll just pay for it because no thank
Well,
you.
and it looks like Bonnie says she has a local fish store that could help her set it up plumbing wise.
Good.
And that's what I say. Have somebody plumb it for you so it's done right and show you how it works, and it's not hard.
do you know
Right.
who is
And
it?
you'll
Mark, wait,
much happier down the
is it
road.
Mark
Trust me. 'Cause
Levison?
it's a lot of work maintaining a tank with hang on back.
Right.
It's a lot more
Is
water
it
changes.
what's Levinson's first name? Is it Mark?
Levinston.
Okay,
Me
he
Loves
used to have an incredible amount of information on building sumps, and I literally used his stuff to build my first sumps. And of course, since then I've even gotten more carried away with them. But I have to laugh because he came down to one of our meetings one day and I said, "You're the one who has the sumps all the time that I use."
Mhm.
And he's turning bright red.
I would absolutely say go to Me Loves Reef on YouTube to learn about sumps and how to drill them and to buy products because he sells great products. And I love Mark. He's wonderful. He's a wonderful person. And definitely, you won't get great sump advice here. Well, you will from Cheryl and Ray, but not from me.
Yeah. But I
I
literally
love sumps. I don't like plumbing them. I have had a sump leak because I tried to plumb it myself and I didn't have the in the box where you have the see, I don't even know the words for the parts. I didn't drill and do and complete a sump myself very well. I'm better with help on that kind of stuff because I'm not engineer kind of minded.
yeah.
And so I don't get all the angles and all that stuff. So if you're not, have someone help you because
Well, what's even funnier, though, I'll tell you up front, is not only did the sumps go together really well and work beautifully, but my ragdoll cat seemed to love jumping in and not testing to see if there was water in there, because he was used to having
Lord.
everything empty when you were working on it, and he never you've never lived until you've seen a cat jump, you yell, jump into the tank full of water, yell, he comes flying back out, and now you're in a royal race around the house to try to catch the cat and get him dried off.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zen Ginger just posted all of Me Loves Reef's links. Thank you very much. And Miss Bonnie, you wait, have you ever heard of? Okay, hang on. Have you guys? Okay, Bonnie, I saw you have 20 freshwater tanks now. That's freaking awesome. And I do know, like, I bred angelfish. I kept discus fish. I never had sumps. I get that it's a different thing. You know, like, why do you need a sump? I could keep all these other fish. With seahorses and with saltwater, the sump just really, you need more filtration. You're trying to think about, I don't know if I'm answering this correctly, but think about it's salt water. There's more chemical makeup in the water. So that's why you need more because the bacteria is different, the everything's different. I did the same as you. I kept freshwater. I never had a sump. Now I would not do a saltwater tank unless I was trying to prove a point, like I am with the seahorses without a sump. But I'd never do a reef without a sump.
The thing
never.
is, with the sump gives you so much more flexibility in terms of adjusting your flow, the direction of your flow, because you're not limited by how far your little rubber tubing will go. And it gives you the ability to modify your sump, what's in your sump, to accommodate what you've got in your tank.
Well, I mentioned earlier, I keep my Robert King char chamber in the tank. Ray, what was your suggestion?
If you really don't like the thoughts of using a sump, just buy a bigger tank and make sure you understock it.
Yep.
That way you've got the extra water then is in the tank merely by understocking it.
It's hard to wrap your mind around because you see water and it's water, you don't get it. But you have to think most of the problems we have with seahorses is bacterial. That's it. It's because bacteria grows quickly. We're not giving them an ocean. So the more water we give them, the less quickly bacteria can cause a problem, right? So the bigger the tank or the bigger the sump and the more equipment is the key to, I think, to keeping seahorses.
Or buy abs.
Huh?
Or buy abs.
Buy abs, right. Abs and keep them cool. No temperature better than for abs because bacteria can't grow. I agree. Or different bacteria grow. Zen wanted to know, have y'all ever heard of or used the seamless sumps that come all pre-made from custom aquariums?
I have pre-made sumps, but they're not custom. I mean, I don't know what those are. I'd have to Google it, but
Sure.
the ones I have were pre-made and they're built with different sections.
I don't know about the specific company that you're talking about, but I have researched custom made sumps and I think they're amazing. I'm just cheap. So, I mean, that's the answer. I'm cheap. And like when
I'm about to look at it, see what it is.
go look at it for us, Holly. But when I set up my first sump on the 29 gallon that I first started with, I literally used an overflow box, and Ronald Chinners made me a custom algae scrubber that fit my tank that I used as a sump. And it wasn't pretty, but it all worked and it was fantastic. Since then, I have plumbed only one sump and it leaked, and I'll never plumb another sump. So I'm with you, Bonnie, or whoever else is scared of sumps. I will not plumb them. From now on, I would go with something like Zen Ginger is talking about and pay for someone to do it or pay for a custom made because I just don't like the plumbing. If you don't get it tight enough, you know. And if you're
they
Cheryl,
look very
I mean,
fancy.
if you're engineerial,
Yeah.
There's what it looks like.
I have never had one of the
Hang on,
sumps that I
let me-
built fail.
Holly, make it big
Can
again.
you see it?
Okay.
So there's their picture of it, and it's different
I see.
sections
Yeah.
plumbed together, and it's made out of high density polyethylene, far
Nice.
superior to acrylic or glass. 3 different tubs, easily connected and expandable for many configurations. Sounds really fancy. 1-piece molded construction, no seams, no welds, no leaks. Glass lids, no warping, yellowing, great for UV lights. They sound very fancy. There's a video of them on here.
But why would you want to spend money for a sump that has all sorts of features you don't really
What do you
need?
mean, though? What do you mean?
You can
You
just stick
choose what you need with this.
Okay, wait a minute. I want to hear Ray's thoughts, though, because I'm going to argue with him. Go ahead.
I've never had well, I shouldn't say that. I bought one sump that was used and had a couple baffles in it, and I took one out and just used the one that was left. That was a 40-gallon sump, and I put that under a 90. All the rest of the sumps, which is numbering to about 16, all the rest of them were just tanks.
Yep.
And you can buy just a plain ordinary tank pretty darn cheap. And if it's going to do what's needed to keep seahorses, why spend a pile of money getting something that's going to cost you?
Let me answer you. Hang on. Let me answer you. It's because I don't want to have to plumb it. I don't want to have to worry about what's it called, you guys? I want to say head, and that sounds, it's not dirty. You know, the head.
But the pre-made sump, you still have to plumb the water going down to it and the water going back.
I know, but you don't have to worry about leaks. You don't have to worry about if you've set it up properly. You don't have to worry about if it's coming back right. It's pre-made, so you don't.
That has nothing to do with the sump.
Yes, it does.
That doesn't matter whether you've got a sump or whether you've got a tank.
I have a tank that is a sump, and it works, and it's great. But it's because Ronald Chinners made the algae scrubber, and he made the part that comes down from the overflow box to the tank. I'm just saying, I hear your
But
point,
when you buy
Ray, but for people,
the expensive one, you're not automatically getting all the other plumbing that where it comes down from your tank down into this.
See, I'd like to build my own
This
swamp.
one, you
hang,
get
hang
it
on,
like
we're all
piece
talking
by
at once. Hang
piece.
on, Cheryl,
Yeah,
let Cheryl speak. Go ahead, Cheryl.
that's just the sock part.
Cheryl, what were you saying?
I was saying I like building my own sumps because I know what I'm putting in the tank, and I know what spaces I'm going to need for a filter sock, for well, it's not a UV sterilizer. Uh, all the equipment that's going in it. I'm getting tired. I can tell. The baffles,
Right. Well, no,
I
Cheryl,
mean,
that's a
I know
great
what.
point because the baffles make a difference too in the flow of the sump. Because Bonnie, you said bulkhead. No, I was talking about head pressure. That was the word I was looking for. The head pressure coming back up to the tank because that has to do with flow, right?
What I
I'm
do
just
is
not good at that stuff. So if I have the baffles already pre-made, I have the sections ready for me. I have the space for the big skimmer, and I have everything calculated for me. It's just better for me because I'm not good at that stuff. I don't like that stuff. I know Cheryl and Ray, you enjoy it. You're DIY people. You want to figure it out and make it perfect. I'm the type that I set something up and it freaking leaks, right? So I like pre-made options.
see, I
Well,
do.
you should see how my
I adjust the
husband set
baffles.
mine up. It's like PVC tubing from the hardware store,
I adjust the
right?
baffles to
But it
different
works.
widths depending on what kind of tank that it's going to be used on. I put in different amounts of room for K1 media, for carbon, and all of that stuff. And so each one is customized for a specific purpose on a specific tank.
Which
And
is amazing. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say. So what ends up happening is they all look a little different because I'm spacing the different compartments to different sizes depending on what's going to be going in the tank.
I get that. I really, really do. And for 50% of our audience, they're probably like, yeah, Cheryl, show me how to set up a sump. The other 50% are right there behind me saying, oh, hell no. Because the last time I tried to set up a baffle in a sump, I got glue everywhere and nothing worked. And it was
Hey,
crooked
you
and it
you
didn't work.
should see it when it happens when my cat decides to jump in a new sump
I
I'm
know
building,
you told
and
us
it's got
about the
water in it.
cat. I know. And I mean, I'm just saying it's that another great example where it depends on where you're at. If you love setting up stuff like this and you're good with plumbing and following instructions and tightening screws perfectly and you can figure out head pressure and you like determining how much water volume you should have, man, if you're an engineering mind, set up your own sump. If that frightens the shit out of you, like me, and you're like, oh, hell no, then as Zen Ginger said, custom aquarium community is great and the mix and match options are awesome. Having
I
90%
like
of the
this question. When the tank water evaporates, does the sump refill when that happens? It depends on whether you have an alternate source of water that can go into the sump. If you don't have an alternate source of water,
hang
you're
on,
not gonna work.
Cheryl, before we answer that, I just wanted to finish what we were just saying. And Holly, you said that with this custom aquariums, you can choose what you want, right?
Yeah, they sell it. So I'll show you if you can.
Okay, I'll make you
Let me
big.
see if I can
Here we
get
go.
it in the frame.
Okay.
So you get it like there's multi
Give me a minute.
pieces you can choose and they
Which
go
one's it?
together. So it's
Best of
not
that.
like one solid sump. You pick what pieces you want and put them together. It looks pretty fancy and expensive. My sump seriously is plumbed with this stuff from the hardware store.
Yep.
my husband just ran tubes basically from the tanks to the sumps. I have one tank that has a built-in overflow, so it's drilled, I guess you would
Mm-hmm.
say. It just came that, and my other one has the boxes. But what he did was he ran this stuff and got plumbing connections from the hardware store to take it to the sump. And I have a funny story because in my display tank, all it is that goes to the sump, there's like a collar. And under the collar, it goes into the sump. And here's my filter sock. But my sumps are not sitting under the tanks. They won't fit under the tanks, they're to the side. So the way he has it is this piece is just sitting in the collar like this, and it can be knocked out. And so one day after I did my water change, at the end, I turn on the pumps, and the last water I add it to the sump. And I kept having to add more water to the
Oh
sump. I'm like,
shit.
well, I'm having to add more water to the sump. It was because this had got knocked out of the
Oh my
collar,
God.
and water was going all over my floor.
Oh shit. See, and that's, I mean, and I'm not trying to say nothing, but that's the danger of doing it yourself is,
Right,
it's not all,
right.
I have my 65 gallon, literally the hose that Robert Chinners used because my algae scrubber sits in a tank that I call my sump.
Mhm.
But he gave me all the equipment to hook it up to the overflow box. And it's a vacuum hose. That's what it is. It's a vacuum hose.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's ingenious.
Whatever
I
works.
think that's so cool. I think that
Yeah.
people who can do that are
And it worked.
amazing. I'm not that inclined engineerily.
I know.
I mean, I just,
When we turned on the pumps, when he first plumbed this up, and each one, each tank, I was the same way. I'm like, is it going to work? Is it going to overflow? What's going to happen? And the key is I have pumps that are adjustable
yep,
speed, right? And so when you do it, you just have to watch when you start it up and adjust the pump. At least in my case, this was how it went. I had to adjust the pump to the speed of the water going down into the sump so that I'm not overflowing the tank faster than
right,
it goes down into the sump. But it wasn't as hard as I pictured it being. Like I was stressed about it
right.
for nothing.
I
It
would
wasn't a
say
big
the
deal.
final answer is do not stress about it. If you have a tank already set up and you want to add a sump, we can help you. If you want to jump in here, we can get people in here, not me, but other people in here like Cheryl and Ray that will literally walk you through, okay, what's this equation, what's that equation, and figure it out. It's not as complicated as it seems. I don't like that stuff, so it scares me. But as Holly said, once you do it and it's good. If you're like me and afraid of that
Yeah.
stuff, set up properly to begin with. Don't have to worry about all that by knowing that you're going to want your seahorses to be there with you for years. And so set it up with a sump. Or if you're going to set up a smaller tank, you ready to do the maintenance and keep them healthy. I did want to jump to Bonnie said, as Cheryl, I'm sorry, Cheryl, I didn't mean to cut you off, but Bonnie asked, when tank water evaporates, does the sump refill when that happens? Cheryl, you were
Oh, it might
answering
get
that.
that low.
Cheryl, I think.
The only way you can replace the evaporation is by doing it manually or using an ATO,
Okay, what's an ATO?
automatic top
Good
off.
job, Ray. And what is that? That literally puts water back in as it evaporates. How do you determine that rate?
How much to put
Yeah.
back in? Well, usually there's either a line on your sump, or you can put a piece of tape on if you want anything to know. And then each day, just top at least once a day, just top it up to that line.
So here's the real
Mine,
question. Wait,
I have
wait,
a
wait.
marking pen that I
Hang
use to
on,
mark
hang on.
mine.
Here's the real question for a seahorse keeper, because here's my problem. I'm removing water
yep.
from taking out excess food, right? In the
Mhm.
all-in-one, when you have a sump, it's different. You have more leniency. But in my all-in-one, I have to remove all uneaten food. So I'm sucking out,
Yes.
my God, half a gallon of water a day, at least, just picking up excess food that they didn't eat. And I'm spitting it out.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, in this all-in-one without a sump,
Now it's low.
now I've got bubbles coming in, the pump's getting air, I've got to add water. So when I'm adding
Yep.
actual distilled water or RODI water, their salinity is going down. So how do you determine
Yep.
when to add distilled water?
That's not evaporated water. The question
I
was
know, but I'm making it more complicated.
evaporation water.
I know.
Yeah, but I
You're
hear
just
you,
trying to-
Kelly, because same here. I never replace water for
See,
evaporation
I do still.
because I'm removing it from siphoning. So I'm always replacing with salt water because I'm removing salt water. I do check the salinity now and then. And if the salinity is starting to go up, then I add my RODI fresh water, or no salt
So
water.
you're mixing it up.
And I have a line on my sump. I have a piece of tape to show me the level in the sump where I want my water.
Yep. Well, okay.
And I add to that, but normally I don't ever add for evaporation because I'm removing gallons a day through siphoning.
So,
like you
so
just
that's
said.
that's the only point I wanted to make. I want to let Ray speak, but I just wanted to say my whole point was, in my case, in the all-in-one tank, I'm dealing with a small volume of water. So everything I do matters, right? And I'm the opposite of Holly. I'm lazy. I typically don't have salt water just made up sitting there anymore because I only have 2 tanks left. I used to have multiple. I used to have gallons ready. Anymore, I don't. So if my tank starts spitting out water because I sucked up too much food, I'm adding RODI or distilled water, and it's bringing the salinity down. And I do within
Yep.
the hour test it, and then I'm like, oh shit, now I got to do another water change. A smaller tank is more work. I'm just telling you, but you have to be conscious of that. So it back to Bonnie's question, as Ray said, the question was, do you have to compensate for evaporation? Absolutely. But if you're constantly sucking out water, you really have to use a testing method to determine how
Yeah.
much you have to compensate, because it's not just evaporation, it's what you're sucking out. What were you going to say, Ray? I'll let you stop. Or I'll let you talk. I'm sorry.
As far as your situation there, whenever you take out salt water, when you're sucking up the crap and that, just replace the exact same amount of salt water at the same specific gravity to the same mark. And then
Yeah.
anything more than that is evaporation. And you replace that with your RODI water.
Gotcha. Look at me. Do you think that I have those measurements? I mean, come on. I'm using a turkey baster. I'm using a turkey baster to suck up crap and
You
food.
don't need, what I put on the thing there, when you start this right from the start, look at the tank and see the level of the tank. There'll be something usually that you can equate that level with, something that's fixed, so that when the water level goes down, you can see how much has gone out.
Yeah.
Then replace it back to that mark. You don't have to measure the water that's coming out.
I get you, and I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and that's really smart. In my case, I usually don't think of that, and I'm sucking out the stuff, and then the pump is spitting out bubbles, and I'm like, shit. Okay. So in my case, it's easier for me to just test, but I do have a question on that, because, and don't you guys love my honesty? I hope you do. But in my case, I've noticed that when I try to, if I haven't made those measurements, as you just suggested, which is smart, if I haven't made them, and all of a sudden the pump spitting out bubbles, I've got to add water. I test the salinity. It's usually high. And then so I add a little bit of distilled or RODI water. I make up water to do a water change. I try to navigate the whole thing without the measurements, as you said, I should have done. But when you're trying to compensate for it and figure it out, I did notice that you get it perfect, and then an hour later, the salinity is different. Why?
I
Do you know what I'm talking about, Holly?
I let mine be different. Well, here's how I do mine. So I go through a 5-gallon bucket of salt water every day for replacing from siphoning in the 2 tanks. And I make my salt water the same every time, the exact same measurement of salt, the exact same measurement of water, because I've been doing it forever. So the salinity is the same always in that water. So when I siphon after the seahorses eat, I get the pump running again and I have a mark on my sump. I have a piece of tape to show me when the water's done going down and it's below that mark. I just replace it with that ready-made salt water that I have, to go back to that mark. I don't really get much evaporation at all. So I'll check my salinity, throughout the week in between the water changes, but I don't check it every day, maybe every 3 days or something.
Yep.
And I'll look and it might not be 1.022 anymore. Now it's 1.024. Okay, now I'm going to put some RODI water in. I don't match salinity exactly. I just pour next time doing the siphoning, instead of using a gallon of salt water, I'll pour one of my gallons of RODI
So
in.
it's not a perfect solution. It's just it's aiming for the it's aiming for the number you want. And Zen Ginger said maybe I didn't mix long enough and the salt hasn't finished dissolving. I bet you're right, because as I said, I don't have it sitting waiting anymore. So therefore I'm mixing it on the spot. You're probably right. But I do want to say, anybody who's watching this conversation that's new, it's not a crisis, right? Unless you're in a smaller tank where the pump's spitting out bubbles and you have to compensate. In that case, I seriously just add RODI or distilled water. I mean, it's not going to hurt anything as long as the tank's big enough.
They're not,
Right.
They don't need their salinity, the exact number.
Right.
All the time. You got to remember, like, they live in estuaries usually. Right. So they've got, their salinity's changing in their environment naturally. So as long as you're not too far off, well, you're within range, you don't want to be like way high and then way low, but as long as you're right in that ballpark, it's not going to.
I was going to say, I was being lazy one week, and just when I saw, it's getting too low, because it's an all-in-one, there's no sump. That's another reason, why a sump is better, because you have the water volume where it's not, it doesn't happen as often where you have to top off. Or, I mean, you still have to top off. I shouldn't say that. But it's just not as, in an all-in-one, if it gets too low, just from you sucking up excess food, you've got the pump spitting bubbles. But one week I was being lazy and I was just using distilled or RODI, every time I saw the bubbles. And when I went to do the water change, I always test when I do the water change, and I was like, oh my God, I don't even remember the number.
You practically had a freshwater tank.
I have freshwater seahorses.
They were in brackish water.
No, it wasn't that bad. I'm totally exaggerating, but they were fine.
It was too low.
And the reason they were fine is because it was gradual. And so when I did the water change, I can't even remember the numbers right now, but let's say I go to 1.023. So I realized it was, oh my gosh, it was 1.017. Oh shit, right? So I mixed my water to 1.021, right? So it wasn't gradual is always the way to go if you realize you've messed up. But Ray,
I
Ray's been
keep
wanting to talk.
mine about 1.020
Huh?
is what
Yeah.
is what I shoot for. Zen Ginger was asking is 1.020 to 1.022. And if it gets a little, but like if you have, because certain, like depending on your tank, you might have other creatures in the tank that want a higher salinity. They can be a higher salinity. I run mine lower because I don't have those creatures. So a 1.020
Right.
is
I'd be
okay
curious to
for mine.
know the best salinity for breeding too. I really would. But Ray's been trying to talk for a minute. Ray, go ahead.
Well, first off, when it comes to evaporation, I don't know too many tanks that are going to have as light an evaporation rate as what
Me
hers
either.
are. My tanks evaporate a lot, like even the 40-gallon ones, there were 440s, and they
Mhm.
all were slightly different, but it's going to vary from system to system because of what you have there and the amount of surface area, the amount of agitation at that surface.
Mhm.
So if you've got two tanks the same size and different agitation, you're going to have different evaporation rate. So personally, I don't want to go 3 days um, uh, without topping up and getting that in or getting that back to normal. But it isn't a death knell because they are able to handle different or changes in specific gravity. The biggest problem with them is a sudden increase is bad. You can have a sudden decrease. You just don't want a sudden increase.
Oh, that's a good
But
point.
with
Yeah.
evaporation, the increase happens slowly as that
Mhm.
evaporation happens. Then you can bring it back again just by dumping in the plain water
Mhm.
and bring it up in a hurry or bring it down in a hurry. But don't ever make some change
Raise
where, like, if you find your specific gravity might be down at 18 and you want it at 26 or something, don't all of a sudden bring it
Mhm.
up to 26. You're going to have problems then. Um, just do it in stages, but that's not a normal scenario anyway. The normal scenario is you're going to be bringing the salinity down. If you inadvertently
Mhm.
do something or something happens in the tank and you have to go the other way, just please remember, do it
Go
slow.
slow.
That's all I have to say on that one at the moment anyway.
Totally agree. No, good points. And it's,
Yeah, that's good to know.
yeah. Anything else? Anybody want to say?
No, I prefer to have more evaporation. It means I've got better air exchange and I'm less likely to have any drop in the pH because that gas exchange is what gives you the proper pH.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I agree.
And, and you should never have to put buffers in a Seahorse tank
Mhm.
because of the volume of water you're changing all the time. And with the gas exchange that you
Mhm.
need to be successful, then buffers are never going to be
Mhm.
a problem in a Seahorse tank.
Smart stuff. And like
Mhm.
when you're talking about evaporation, if you were never removing food, like I remember in my reef tank, if my little marker on the sump, I saw the water
Mhm.
was below it, I just added RODI because I knew that was just evaporation. The difference with
Mhm.
seahorses is that if you're removing food, you're pulling out salt water too.
Yeah.
If the water goes down
Yeah.
on its own, it's evaporation. If you're
Yeah.
sucking out, then it's also salt water, right?
Or in my case, it could be the overflow boxes aren't working
Well,
properly.
right.
That's what I worry about when I see the sump gets low on water. I'm like, okay, the tank's filling up faster. That means the overflow boxes aren't pulling
You
water
guys,
down this
don't let Holly scare you. She has a special tank. If you set up your
Oh,
tank,
you
you won't have those
learn your
problems.
stuff. You learn your
That's
stuff
right.
as you go, but like I said, don't be afraid of it. You'll figure it out and it'll be fine.
Yep. And Zen Ginger,
No reason to worry about the
yep.
sump.
What kind of problems were you having with your overflow boxes?
Oh, well, they can get clogged like I was talking about earlier and that before you came on,
I never had
because
that happen in
because
over
of
10
the
years of use.
nature of
Ray,
them.
she has a special tank with special overflow boxes. They're different. They're not the same. So,
They're more like I said, they're not tubes, they're
yeah.
slots. So they're
Yeah.
super narrow and yeah, if anything builds up or gets stuck in them and I have to flush it out or
Well,
yeah,
two of my overflows were homemade PVC ones.
that was
It wasn't,
probably a lot better.
it wasn't even a box. It was just tubes that were looked more like a trombone.
Yeah, I bet it worked. I bet that would probably be better for me than these fancy acrylic boxes. Because
Well,
yeah,
it
I
wasn't
can't fit
better. It was
stuff
just
in them
cheaper
to
for me.
clean them.
I had two overflows already, but I bought them used, and then
Uh-huh.
I couldn't find any more used ones, so I just made PVC ones because it was cheap.
Yeah, I like that idea though. That might be actually better than what I have. The problem with mine is these darn slots are so narrow. They're like less than the width of my finger. So it's really hard if anything gets stuck in there. Like I've had pieces of sponge get in there. I've had, the mysis will get in there and clog. The algae can be in there and I'd have to disassemble the whole darn thing. Like my husband says, you'd have to take one down and leave it running off one overflow box and put it in the bleach bucket
Couldn't
to
you
clean.
use long pipe cleaners, shove down and swish it back and forth?
They won't because of the thing. I've stuck stuff in there because I have these cleaners that are designed to clean, like aquarium tubes and stuff. They won't they won't go all the way in there. I can clean part of it. They're just a bitch. What more can I say? I'm not very happy with them, but it'd be a big job to switch out for something else. So I just kind of deal with them. I've learned how to deal
Well,
with
and
them.
that's
Is the
what
most
people have to do is if you have a particular circumstance, you just got to figure it out and learn how to deal with it for sure. Again, if you want to not have problems, set up, according to design to begin with. But if you do find yourself in a circumstance, we'll figure it out. That's it. Bonnie wanted, guys, my AirPod died. That's why I was kind of silent for a moment. And it's running on 1027. Love talking to you guys every week. Missed you last week. So I understand when we're going long tonight. But we're going to have to close soon. And Bonnie asked, do you keep tank lids on your Seahorse tanks? Anybody have a thought?
No, I have used lids intermittently. I don't need them now, I found, but I had a hood on my display tank for a while. I have a two tank. So my display tank is acrylic and it the top is not completely open. It's like slots kind of on the top. And then it had a hood which I removed because I didn't like it. But then I have my 75-gallon glass tank in here. And there were times during one summer when I did put a homemade kind of acrylic piece on top of it because we had a problem with the lighting was attracting moths
Mm,
at night. And then we had praying mantis would come in to go after the moths. I would come in the morning to feed the seahorses, and they'd be like 10 or 15 praying mantises hanging out on the tank. And they were smart, though. They didn't fall in like the moths did, but the moths would get in the tank and in this so I would cover it for that. But then I finally found these heavy duty mesh screens for my doors that keep the bugs out
There's the answer.
and, and keep them out of the house. But I try not to have lids on my tanks, but I've had to put stuff over them sometimes.
But Ray,
for
why
reasons
is it
like that.
important not to lid your Seahorse tank?
Because of the reduction in the gas exchange. It limits the amount of fresh air that's available at the surface of the water. Even screening can reduce the flow or the amount of air that's available to that surface. So if you have to use screening, use the most open board screen that you can for the purpose. If you're doing it just for fish that you have in there that happen to be jumpers, then it's better to use something like egg crate.
Agreed. And no, exactly. That's so important. And I am terrified when I see people trying to set up Seahorse tanks in like the all-in-ones that have the lid with the light. I'm like, oh no, please don't do that. Not a good idea. Not a good plan, because it's all about air exchange. And I've had tanks that I had to set a light upon it, but I've never covered a tank. I get why you had to, Holly, but as Ray said, egg crate is probably the best method. And why is air exchange so important, Ray?
Why is
air
it?
exchange so important?
Well, that's part of the whole process. The gas exchange, getting that fresh oxygen in there, get your. Oh yeah.
That's why I asked you to explain. I know it's true, but
the gases that they're in the tank. I'm trying to think the carbon dioxide or carbon. Yeah, it's carbon dioxide, not carbon monoxide. You want that carbon dioxide out of the tank, and you need the oxygen in there. And the most common thing that you're going to find affected and the fastest is pH. So if you suspect you've got a gas exchange there, check your pH. And what you do is take a sample of the water, check the pH on it, and if it's low, you take that outside and hook up an air pump to it, leave it run for an hour or two, check the pH again. And if the pH has gone up, you know you don't have enough gas exchange.
Good test. I didn't know that. Yeah, and
oh, Bonnie brought up a good point, because I was just going to bring that up. If you have bubblers for people that have to have covered tanks because they have jumping fish or whatever, does that help? Like if they have stuff creating bubbles in the tank?
Not a lot, unless it's enough to really increase the surface of the water sufficient to overcome the lack of fresh air.
Yeah.
A spray bar
it's
enough.
more about the surface agitation. If you're looking at the top of your tank, you need to see stuff moving.
Yeah.
Right? I always do whether it be a sump or even in my all-in-one, the returns, the lock line.
They're up high.
I have one of them, actually I have both of them halfway out of the water pointing in different directions, but to where they're pushing, they're getting air, they're pushing air, and they're making that waves across the top of the tank. That's what creates the gas exchange, is the waves across the tank. A bubbler, yeah, it's popping bubbles, but that's not really creating waves, right? You want movement.
Mine do.
If
Mine
you
do. Mine are turned up pretty high. But I also have my return nozzles are so high that when the tank comes back on, when the pump comes on, it's like a waterfall.
No, I agree. And yeah, covering the tank doesn't help with evaporation. I don't agree with that. Go ahead, Ray. You were going to say something.
Yeah, large bubbles will work better than small ones. Small ones, all they're going to do is promote more salt creep. Larger ones, if you have sufficient ones, it will increase the turmoil at the surface. But whether it's going to be enough for you if you have restricted air coming to that surface is another thing. The best thing you can do is, in any case, is get that get the extra air in there. Now, many years ago, back when all-in-ones first started, there was a fellow here in the city, uh, didn't have seahorses at the time, but he had other fish in it, and he was asking me what can he do for it. He says he keeps putting buffer in, but the pH still stays down. So I went over and I did the test. We tested his pH. We took it outside, put an air pump to it, and the pH went up. So I said, your problem is not getting enough air. But because of the way this all-in-one was built, he could not take the lid off of it and leave it off and have the whole thing function. So what I did, told him to go out and buy a decent sized air pump. And so he got that. I drilled a hole in the back of the hood where the light was, and then hooked up so that the pump was pumping air into that. And I said, if that's not enough just coming from the room, then hook up so you have an intake coming from a window.
Yep. Absolutely. No, great advice. If you're ever in that circumstance and you come to this channel, we'll ask Ray to walk you through that. I've done it, but I couldn't walk you through it, but I've done it. And yeah, in my all-in-one, there's no lid. It's completely open. But yeah, you can come up with solutions, like Ray said, but air, gas exchange is really important. So surface agitation is really important. And I'm glad you brought that up, Ray, that there is a way to solve it. It's just, you got to figure it out, right? Yep. All right, guys, it's 10.
The only thing we haven't solved so far is tests for DO.
I know, and that's your main focus. And we will hit up on that again next week, I promise, because we got to figure out tests for DO. But for tonight, guys, the kids are yapping in my ears. They want food. Oh my gosh, it's 10:30. Should I feed them? I probably should. So I'm gonna have to go. But
how old did you say they were?
What?
How old did you say they were?
16. They just got home.
And what did you say? You have to get food for them?
They better start learning to make their own food.
Oh my gosh. They were talking about they want to go to college, right? Of course, they're going to go to college. But they were talking about they talked to admissions counselors yesterday. And one of my daughters that gets really good grades, she was like, well, I really want to go to this Christian college right near us. But I don't want to stay near you. That's literally what she said to me. And I said, can't wait to see it, babe. I bet you're calling me every day for money, for food, for everything. You better not go far, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
You better make sure they both go to the same place, because you can't be in two places at the same time.
But you know what, Ray? The one thing that I regret about their childhood is I've made them share a room their whole lives. I think they need some separation. I don't know. We'll see. But
we'll make sure they have microwaves.
Yeah. My daughters are so freaking spoiled they won't eat reheated food. I said, I can't wait till you're in college. You're going to be ramen babies, right? But anyways.
Well, if you don't feed them anything else and reheated food is all there is, sooner or later they're going to eat.
I admitted they're spoiled. I admitted it. But for tonight, you guys, enough about me and my lame life. We will be back next week. Sorry about last week. We will not miss another. I'm going to try to get some more guests in here, but I just love this community and just us chatting. So I'm cool with us staying small and just talking about whatever we need to talk about or you need to talk about. Just make sure you keep coming, asking questions, giving us something to chat about so that we're here for a reason. But for tonight, let's say Happy Wine Wednesday and see you next week. And Cheryl, thank you for coming. I know you've been so busy. Thank you. Everybody say Happy Wine Wednesday. I grabbed the wrong cup. Shit. Happy
Happy
Wine
Wine
Happy
Wednesday.
Wine